Hey there, and welcome to Bedtime History. If you're just settling in, grab a blanket, fluff up your pillow, and let the outside world drift away for a little while. You're in exactly the right place if you're looking for a quiet escape, somewhere between history's forgotten corners, whispered myths, and the kind of stories that feel like lullabies for your mind. I'm Remy, and I am your host for tonight at the Bedtime History. Let's wind together the roads of ancient tales, dusty manuscripts, and half-remembered legends, and turn them into something soft enough to fall asleep to. No rush. No noise. Just slow, soothing storytelling under the stars of your imagination. So dim the lights, maybe leave a fan running for that gentle background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Because history doesn't always have to be loud to be unforgettable. Sweet dreams, and thank you for being here. Tonight we tiptoe into a warm and flowery corner of history you never knew you needed. You're not sneaking into a pharaoh's tomb or scaling the Great Pyramid. Nope. You're slipping into the back door of an ancient Egyptian bakery, where the air smells of sweet yeast and roasting grain, and where cats rule the flower-covered roost. Picture this: the sun's barely up over the Nile, already hot enough to make your sandals melt. You're squinting into the morning haze, and there it is, your destination. A low mud brick building pulsing with life. Clay ovens glow faintly from within. And crouched along the stone ledges, twitching tails and blinking eyes await you. These aren't ordinary cats. These are the grain guardians, the flower phantoms, the sacred slinkers of the granaries. You probably won't survive this if you have a gluten allergy or a thing against whiskers, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the time where you are right now. I love seeing how far this cozy caravan travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the granary with the heat already pressing into your spine like a giant, sunlit cat paw. The air is thick with chaff, and the buzzing of flies is only half as loud as the scratchy mews echoing from the storehouse. You slip in quietly, although let's be real, your arrival is already well documented by the 4 cats lounging atop sacks of emmer wheat, giving you that unimpressed side-eye cats have perfected over 9,000 years. They're not scared of you, but they are watching. Inside, it's darker, cooler. The bakery is carved into the side of the main granary, separated only by a reed curtain and the stern supervision of an old man chewing on something that's probably not legal in 3 modern countries. He nods at the cats and mutters, "Better than any scribe." And he's not wrong. These bakery cats aren't pets, they're an elite pest control unit. Mice, rats, and grain beetles quake in their tiny sandals. You spot one cat stretched out over a stack of barley sacks like it owns the entire harvest. Which, in a way, it does. Mainstream historians agree that cats were domesticated in Egypt largely because of their role in guarding food stores. But here in the bakery, their job isn't just practical, it's spiritual. Bakers swear that when cats purr beside the dough mixers, the loaves rise better. Superstition? Maybe. But when your livelihood depends on the gods not cursing your bread, you take no chances. You duck as a ginger cat leaps from a ceiling beam and lands precisely on a fat mouse fleeing across the counter. The baker grunts approval, tosses the cat a dried fig, and mutters something about paying wages on time. You're not sure if he means the fig or the mouse. Near the back, there's a kind of shrine. Not ornate, just a sunlit square of floor where no one steps. 3 cats are curled in tight spirals, their ears flicking in harmony. One opens an eye to look at you, then yawns in a way that somehow feels like both a blessing and a warning. A small clay figure sits nearby, a cat-headed deity with paws on a loaf of bread. Botet, but more domestic. Less war, more wheat. Fringe theory time. Some fringe Egyptologists believe there was a lost minor deity, patron of kitchen hearths and baking ovens, who took the form of a cat covered in flour. Her name? Possibly Seshmetet, though there's little hard evidence beyond a few cracked wall carvings and the dreams of a very eccentric German archaeologist. You edge closer to the ovens. The scent is intoxicating: warm honey, dust, and smoke. And beneath that, fish. Because, of course, there's a fish drying rack above the grain press. That's not for the bakers. That's for the staff. One particularly fluffy tabby guards it like the crown jewels. Historians still argue whether these bakery cats were owned by the temple system or if they simply appeared like ghosts with tails and opinions. Some say bakers paid a kind of tax to Bastet's temples for the privilege of hosting feline protection. Others argue the cats simply followed the grain, and the rituals followed them. A small kitten crawls out from a stack of papyrus sacks and stares at you like it's sizing you up for a curse. You resist the urge to pet it. Word on the dusty streets says petting a kitten without its permission could earn you a month of soggy bread and failed risings. Not worth it. You settle near the door as the morning rush begins. Farmers deliver grain, scribes argue about weight measurements, and cats, well, cats saunter. One hops into a bowl of freshly sifted flour and rolls on its back. The baker sighs, scoops the cat out, does not discard the flour, and mumbles, extra flavor. It's not gross. It's divine intervention. Outside, the Nile glimmers in the distance, the light catching on reeds and the backs of hippos pretending to be rocks. But inside, all focus is on dough and heat and tails weaving through legs. You're not sure when it happened, but you're relaxed now, warm and sleepy despite the bustle. A cat curls around your ankle and purrs. Just once. A low, buzzing sound like a miniature oven whispering secrets. You've been accepted. You're still seated near the door when the first clumsy batch of dough hits the ground with a wet splunk. A baker curses under his breath. Nothing loud, just a muttered insult aimed at the loaf for daring to be heavy in the wrong direction. You watch as he wipes his hands on a linen wrap already more dough than cloth, but he doesn't reach for a broom. Instead, a sleek black cat with a notch in one ear slinks forward like royalty summoned. With a casual sniff and the most dismissive flick of her tail, she circles the fallen dough, steps over it rather than in it, and proceeds to hop directly onto the prep table, trailing faint clouds of flour from her paws. And no one stops her. In fact, the baker nearby merely nods. The paws bless the rise, he says, as if repeating an old proverb. This is your first close-up of a bakery cat in action. Not as a mouser, but as part of the team. She walks across the prep dough, circles once, and then settles right in the center like a loaf with opinions. You expect the baker to shoo her off. He doesn't. Instead, he marks a tiny tally on a clay tablet beside him. Is he tracking how many times this cat naps on the dough? Or is it part of some purring ritualistic ledger? You're not sure. Ancient records show that Egyptian bakers, particularly those under temple contracts, were highly superstitious about every stage of bread making. Timing, temperature, prayers to grain spirits, and apparently flour-dusted cats. One cat steps onto a basket of raw barley, sits exactly in the center, and begins licking its paw in a rhythm that matches the slap 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 of dough hitting the bench. You swear the bakers speed up slightly, trying to match him. This isn't random. This is choreography. Historians agree that bread was central to Egyptian life, not just as food, but as currency. Workers were often paid in loaves. And where there's bread, there's grain. And where there's grain, there are grain thieves. Rats, insects, rival bakers, priests who nibble when they think no one's looking. It's a never-ending battle. Cats were enlisted as much for their holy symbolism as for their relentless predation. But this, what you're seeing now, goes beyond utility. You spot a scroll tucked beside a storage amphora. Not a religious text, not a ledger, but something stranger. A series of doodles, yes doodles, of cats in various poses, sitting atop a sunbeam, curled beside a hot oven, one swiping at what looks suspiciously like a rolling pin. Each sketch is labeled in careful hieroglyphics, and some are downright poetic. The Sun-taker. Watcher of Loaves. He who demands the second rise. Fringe scholars argue that these were the original bakery gods. Before Bastet's cult grew in power, before temples standardized worship, there may have been dozens of local feline spirits, each associated with a different kitchen, each with a unique blessing. Maybe that's why one bakery's loaves rose fluffier, another's crust turned honey brown. Not luck. Not yeast. Cat magic. You shuffle to the corner, where a pair of cats, one with half a tail, the other with mismatched eyes, are perched beside the fermentation jars. The air is thick with the tang of old dough and wild yeast. One of the bakers whispers to them before stirring the batch. You lean in and catch the words, "Don't let the gods sleep too long." No one acknowledges your confusion, but a younger apprentice slips you a knowing grin. "They wake the yeast," he says with a wink. "Per vibrations. Ancient science." Historians still argue whether this belief in cat-vibrated fermentation was symbolic or genuine. There's no papyrus explicitly outlining feline-assisted rising techniques, but several bakery murals show cats nestled beside bubbling jars, their tails curling like steam. And the flour. Oh, the flour. It's everywhere. On the benches, in the air, on the cats, especially the cats. One walks past, entirely white from ear to paw, looking less like a predator and more like a powdery ghost. She leaves tiny paw prints behind her on the cool stone floor, and no one dares wipe them away. You kneel beside a storage bin to get a better view. Inside, the grain shifts suddenly. A striped tail flicks up like a warning flag, and then disappears again. The lid had been slightly ajar. Just wide enough for one particularly round bakery cat to make herself at home in the literal food supply. A baker shrugs at your look of alarm. She'll keep it clean. He doesn't mean tidy. He means alive. Rodents won't dare approach a bin she's marked as hers. One whiff of that tail and they'd rather chew bricks. One of the most bizarre facts uncovered in recent decades is a bakery inventory list from the reign of Amenemhat III that includes, among the usual wheat measurements and amphora counts, 5 well-fed cats, one with divine spots. Some think it's a joke. Others, not so much. Cats weren't just tolerated, they were counted assets. As you follow the sound of a bell, more chime than ring, you see a cat leap gracefully onto a cooling tray, inspect the loaves, then hop down again. Apparently satisfied. You swear one of the loaves has a paw print burned into the top. Lucky loaf, a baker mutters. Later, in a quieter moment, you hear someone sweeping. Not the floor though. A baker is gently brushing flour off a cat's back with what looks like a goose feather. She doesn't seem to mind. You're not sure if this is grooming, reverence, or part of some health code. But let's be real. There is no health code in 1400 BCE. There's just belief, instinct, and about 20 cats making themselves absolutely indispensable. The shift slows. Loaves line up like soldiers on clay trays, ready for the priests, or market, or both. Cats recline in the last rays of daylight sneaking through the vent holes. The air hums with heat and purring. You realize you haven't moved in 20 minutes. Maybe it's the flour in your lungs, or the soft paw thumps all around you. Or maybe you're finally syncing with the rhythm of this flour-dusted world. You lean back. The floor is warm. Your eyelids heavy. Somewhere nearby, a cat stretches and yawns. You're not sure who's watching who anymore. You wake to the sound of crunching, dry, rhythmic, unmistakable. Not bones. Not rats. Biscuits. Someone is eating biscuits. But not just anyone. A pale tabby with a regal slouch sits beside an altar-like stack of bread loaves, calmly munching on something that smells suspiciously like honey and caraway. You blink groggily. Was this cat served breakfast? You're not imagining it. A young boy, probably an apprentice too new to question things, carefully places another plate. Yes, plate, near the cat, then bows. Bowing to a creature currently licking its toes with zero regard for its divine status. And that's when you notice the bread. Not just the warm, edible kind lining baskets and trays. No. These loaves are decorative. Some are shaped like fish, others like tiny pyramids, and one, seriously, looks like a reclining cat with actual raisin eyes. You move closer, drawn by the sheer weirdness of it, and find yourself standing before what could only be described as a bread altar. It's not even a holiday. It's just Wednesday. Bread offerings were a staple in Egyptian religious practice, sure. You know that. Every temple, every god, everyday offerings. But here, in the bakery's inner chamber, it's different. These loaves aren't meant for Osiris or Ra or even Botet. They're not going to the temple. They're staying here. Guarded by cats. Eaten by cats. Worshipped by cats. You squint. There's a mural behind the bread stack, faded but unmistakable. It's a painting of cats baking bread. Not symbolic cats. Literal cats, upright, with little aprons tied around their bellies, one holding a paddle, another flinging grain from a basket. One even has a chef's hat. Okay, probably a misinterpreted headdress, but come on. This is beyond quirky. This is borderline heretical. Mainstream historians say there were dozens of localized bread shapes, many connected to different deities. But fringe scholars point out a bizarre anomaly found in one Middle Kingdom tomb. Tiny loaves shaped like cats, stacked in ceremonial jars. Not buried for humans. Not even food for the afterlife. Just entombed on their own. You look down at the table again. The loaves are warm. Fresh. The air around them hums gently, thick with incense and yeast. One cat stands up and places both front paws on the edge of the table, as if inspecting. A priest? A judge? A very spoiled food critic? There's an older woman kneeling nearby, her skin lined like the folds of a well-kneaded dough. She's humming softly and carefully brushing honey glaze over one of the loaves, only the cat-shaped ones. Not the fish. Not the gods. She doesn't acknowledge you, but when she speaks, it's as if she's reading your mind. They gave us bread, she says, eyes on her work. So we gave them loaves of themselves. You can't tell if she means the cats gave the humans bread, or if she thinks the cats are bread. Honestly, it could go either way. She finishes her task, stands slowly, and walks to a corner shelf where a cat skull, polished and placed in a tiny gold shrine, rests beneath a sprig of dried mint. She lights a small flame beside it, whispers a word you don't recognize, and bows. Historians still argue whether such feline-focused bread rituals were widespread or isolated oddities. There's no centralized cult of the bakery cat in the official records. But things like this, loaf-shaped altars, cat-glazed buns, and skull shrines, suggest something more personal. Less about state religion. More about relationship. The cats clearly aren't worshipping back. But they accept the offerings with the smug tolerance of a deity who's seen it all before. One young cat, a jittery kitten with ears too big for its face, leaps onto the altar and knocks a loaf onto the floor. You expect the woman to scold it. She doesn't. Instead, she picks up the loaf, turns it over, and murmurs, "Chosen." She places that loaf into a small basket lined with linen and herbs. Apparently, being mauled by kitten paws makes a loaf more spiritually potent. You file that away under absurd yet somehow probable. You wander deeper into the room and realize it's circular. A soft trickle of light spills through a narrow slit in the ceiling, illuminating a stone slab at the center. Embedded in it are fossilized paw prints, 5. Perfectly preserved. The slab is worn down around the edges, as though hundreds of feet have circled it over time. One of the cats saunters to the slab, steps right into the central paw print, and curls up. It's too perfect. Too precise. That one's name is Mews, the woman whispers behind you. You jump. She's the fourth to carry the name. When one dies, another takes her place. Always white. Always walks the dough at sunrise. You don't question how she knows. This is her realm. Her oven temple. Her dough chapel. And Mews is her priestess. Suddenly, you feel underdressed. Should you have brought an offering? Maybe a fish? A cheese wedge? A complimentary grooming brush? A nearby apprentice slips you a small round loaf. Hold this, he says. But don't eat it. It's got cat hair baked in. Right. Of course it does. You sit with it cradled in your hands. It's warm. A little heavy. Smells faintly of dill. And yet, it feels sacred. In the background, someone begins to hum again. A deep, rhythmic tone that pulses like breath. A few cats join in, not vocally obviously, but with synchronized tail flicks and blinks. The woman pours a thin stream of oil into a lamp shaped like a sleeping cat and lets it burn. You're part of it now, she says without looking. And you believe her. The scent shifts subtly before you hear the sound. A change in the air, like cinnamon drifting into grief. It's quieter here now. The playful mews are hushed, the ovens banked low, the apprentices gone. You walk slowly toward a back chamber you hadn't noticed before, shielded by a curtain of woven papyrus charms. They jingle faintly as you pass through, little bells shaped like paws and tiny clay mice swinging softly. Inside, the air is cool. Not from any breeze, but from the weight of memory. You're in a burial room. A low shelf runs along the wall, lined with what look like small, ornate jars. No wider than your hand, but glazed in blues and ochres, each marked with careful hieroglyphs and a painted image of a cat. Some are sleek and alert. Some curled in sleep. Some aren't whole. This is where the bakery cats go when they die. One urn has a paw print baked into the surface. Another is wrapped with linen strips, meticulously crisscrossed and tucked like a child's bandage. And resting near the center of the room is something that stops you mid-breath, a miniature sarcophagus. Jet black wood, trimmed with gold leaf. It's shaped like a cat lying down, ears perked. You kneel beside it without realizing. The carvings are delicate, bread loaves, fish, even tiny ovens. Scenes of feline life and feline work, like some sacred comic strip etched in reverence. Yes, you're still in a bakery. But this isn't about bread anymore. Mainstream scholars widely acknowledge that Egyptians mummified animals, especially cats, as offerings to the gods, particularly Botet. But this doesn't feel like an offering. It feels like a retirement. An honoring. Like the cat buried here wasn't just a servant to the divine. It was the divine, in flower-dusted fur. You run a finger lightly along the edge of the sarcophagus. Dust stirs. A faint scent rises, lavender and something deeper, older, like time itself preserved in linen. In the corner, a wall painting, subtly faded, shows a cat ascending a staircase made of bread. Each step is a different loaf, round barley, triangular millet, long white wheat. At the top, a golden sun shaped like a kneaded roll, warm and glowing. The cat is mid-step, tail high, back arched proudly. You can't help it. You smile. There's an altar here too. Simpler than the bread altar from before. A low slab of stone with 3 small offerings, a bowl of milk, sour now, a tiny grilled fish, and a paw-shaped loaf. You get the sense these are renewed daily. Someone still tends this space, even now. You spot the caretaker again, the same old woman from the previous chamber. She's lighting a cone of incense and humming a slow tune that rolls like syrup. She doesn't speak at first. Just kneels and places another poor loaf on the slab. Finally she says, "Not all of them die naturally." You glance at her, unsure how much to ask. She doesn't wait. Snakes. Ovens. Sometimes, jealous priests. Right. Because in a land where a cat can be a god and a bakery can be a temple, politics still exist. Not everyone appreciates a purring prophet. She lifts one of the jars and cradles it gently. This one was Mews II. She slept in the firewood and never woke. Your breath catches. She places the jar back and strokes its side. But we dream of her still. Every cat dreams of those before. Fringe Egyptologists have posited that certain temples may have practiced forms of feline ancestral veneration, passing down names, behaviors, even preferred napping spots from one cat to the next. A kind of feline reincarnation, not spiritual exactly, but memory-based. Collective. You're standing in what could be proof. Do the cats ever visit? You ask softly. She nods. They never leave. That's when you notice the shadows. There are more cats in the room than you realized. Silent. Still. Watching. Tucked into corners, perched atop ledges, slipping between pottery like smoke. One curls atop a stone box. Another sits on a ledge behind the sarcophagus, eyes glinting gold. And they're not watching you. They're watching her. Because she's not just a baker. She's a priestess. Or a caretaker. Or both. She smells of thyme and barley and smoke and fur. Her robe is streaked with flour, and her sandals are patched with palm fronds. But there's something in the way she moves, reverent, precise, that tells you she's done this every day for decades. Possibly her whole life. Historians still argue whether roles like hers were officially sanctioned or self-appointed. The lines between baker, priest, and caretaker often blurred, especially in smaller communities, where religious practices were less about the grand temples and more about the home gods. The flower gods. The ones that purred when the dough was perfect. She speaks again, barely louder than the fire crackle. You mustn't step between them and the fire. That's when they whisper. To you? You ask. She doesn't answer. Just smiles. Which is somehow more unsettling than silence. You're guided out gently, by the cats. One walks ahead. Another behind. A third brushes against your shin until you move the right way. You find yourself back in the main baking hall without remembering how you got there. But something's changed. The loaves look the same. The ovens still glow. But the cats, now you see them differently. Not just workers. Not just sacred. Not even just worshipped. They are remembered. And in Egypt, that's the real immortality. The next time you blink it's dusk, and the bakery is emptying. Well, mostly emptying. The bakers are shuffling out, stretching sore arms and brushing off flour, their skin a shade lighter than it was this morning. The apprentices follow, quieter now, trailing the scent of sourdough and sweat. But the cats? They're just getting started. You hear them first, soft thumps of paws on stone, the scratch of claws against wood, the tiny click of amphora lids being nudged open. You follow the sound through the courtyard and into a fenced garden behind the bakery. You hadn't noticed it before, but it's more than a garden. It's a training ground. And tonight, the moon is out, casting everything in silver and mystery. At first, it looks like cats playing. A few pounce, roll, and tumble like overgrown kittens. But the longer you watch, the more deliberate it feels. One older cat sits on a raised platform, staring down like a pharaoh, while younger cats sneak through the reeds and launch coordinated mock attacks on bundles of dried herbs hung from poles. Welcome to the Mouse Hunt Apprenticeship Trials. An elder baker, his robe more whole than cloth, leans beside you, arms crossed. This is where they learn not to ruin the flour sacks, he says, voice soft as worn linen. To hunt clean. To kill without leaving marks. You nod slowly, unsure whether he means literal killing or metaphorical. He hands you a small parchment scroll. On it, a series of crude drawings. A mouse. A paw print. A wheat stalk. And a cat-shaped sigil drawn with what smells suspiciously like fish oil. That's the mark of the best of them, he says, pointing to the sigil. Not born with it. Earned. You glance back at the field. One young tabby stalks a weighted clay mouse with the precision of a priest setting a sacred offering. She waits. Waits. Pounces. The mouse clatters, but she's already moved on, vanishing into the grass like steam from a hot loaf. The elder baker grunts in approval. That one's close. There's a row of small clay ovens set into a sidewall, too small for bread, but just right for warming paws. Kittens gather there, licking their whiskers and watching the older cats with the hungry envy of freshmen eyeing varsity players. One tries to sneak into the training ground, but a stern swipe from an elder sends it tumbling back into the safety zone. Even in the land of divine cats, there's a hierarchy. Historians widely agree that cats were taught hunting behaviors by observation, not formal training. But this feels different. It's not just play. It's a system. And the humans are in on it. You spot an apprentice baker scattering something on the training field. You creep closer, dried mint, fish scales, and a few loose grains. A tempting trail. Bait, maybe. Or a sensory challenge. Smell matters, the elder explains. So does silence. And shadow. They learn everything the mice don't want them to know. One cat slinks along the base of the fence, her belly almost touching the ground. You can see the tension in her legs, the patience in her eyes. She's not just sneaking. She's studying. Waiting for the wind to change. You feel your own breathing slow, instinctively matching hers. And then, snap. She's on the bundle in a flash, toppling it, pinning it with both paws and delivering a perfect pretend bite to the center. The elder lets out a wheeze that might be a laugh. She'll earn her name tonight. Which, apparently, is a thing. You hadn't realized that not all bakery cats are named at birth. Some are simply cat. Or stripe. Or stop that, you little flower demon. But those who prove themselves during these trials? They get real names. Honorifics. Titles. Sometimes more than one. You walk past a painted board propped up beside the exit. It's a hall of fame of sorts, tiny paw prints pressed into fired clay tiles, each labeled in careful script. Saffron rise. Sharp whisker of dawn. Mouse taker before light. Third Meum. You smile. Somewhere out there is a cat called Third Meum, probably curled on her own cushion, sipping milk and swatting rodents into submission. Historians still argue whether these naming traditions were human-assigned or developed within the bakery communities themselves. There's no centralized feline bureaucracy, at least not one that leaves paperwork. But the repetition of names like Meum across murals, urns, and loaves suggests something more than coincidence. You settle onto a bench near the edge of the field, where another elder cat dozes beside an oil lamp. The flame flickers gently, casting long shadows that move like liquid across the stone. You realize some of the cats are mimicking those shadows, practicing movement, timing, silence. One young gray kitten stands stock still, tail twitching. He's staring down a carved mouse no bigger than your thumb. He crouches, waits, and sneezes. The mouse clatters. So does your heart. The older cat doesn't even open his eyes, just lifts one paw and boops the kitten on the head with a slow, unimpressed thud. A light laugh bubbles out of you before you can help it. This isn't just training. It's theater. It's tradition. A culture within a culture, preserved not on papyrus, but in paw prints, shadows, and the scent of mint. One last thing catches your eye, a small pool at the far edge of the garden. Cats take turns lapping at the water, and just beside it sits a stone platform shaped like an eye. A single loaf, untouched, rests in the center. First kill gets the eye loaf, the elder says. You glance again. Sure enough, the victorious tabby is slinking toward it now, slow and proud, tail high like a flag. She steps onto the platform, sniffs the loaf, then sits down beside it, blinking once, then twice. Accepted. You sit in the fading moonlight, surrounded by soft rustles, tiny pounces, and whispers that aren't quite words. The trials go on. And you are completely still. Because here, in the garden of flower ghosts and silent pawfalls, movement is earned. You don't know when the cats begin to gather, only that you're no longer alone. At first, it's subtle, just a few dark shapes slipping through the reed fence, eyes gleaming gold in the moonlight. Then more arrive. From rooftops, from under carts, from doorways you're sure didn't exist before. One by one, they converge, silent as mist, forming a slow-moving spiral across the garden floor. No meows. No hissing. Just the rhythmic flick of tails and the creak of old wood beneath feline weight. You're witnessing something sacred. This is Bastet's night watch. You shift slightly on your bench, heart thudding too loudly. A single pair of eyes turns your way, emerald, unblinking, and you go still. The cat blinks once, slow as syrup, then turns back to the gathering. Accepted. Again. The circle tightens. Not in a threatening way. More like containment. Focus. Purpose. You glance up. The moon sits directly overhead now, a perfectly baked disk in the oven of the sky. You can't help but imagine someone up there using a cosmic bread peel to flip it. The cats begin to move in rhythm, tails high, bodies low, pacing clockwise. One steps forward and drops a mouse carcass in the center of the circle. Another lays a feather. A third, inexplicably, sets down a dried fig. Offerings? Currency? Warnings? You're not sure. What's clear is that this isn't just for show. The temperature drops slightly, and a breeze you can't quite feel rustles the papyrus curtain behind you. Every cat freezes. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. And then, a low purr. Not from one cat, but from all of them. Together. A deep, rolling sound, like a furnace waking from slumber. It vibrates in your chest, in the soles of your feet, behind your eyes. You almost fall forward, like gravity's changed. This is their hymn. Mainstream scholars agree that Botet was one of the most worshipped deities in Egypt, goddess of protection, fertility, and of course cats. Her official temples were grand, filled with statues and chanting priests. But this is different. There are no humans leading the rites here. The cats are the choir, the clergy, and the congregation. One black cat, older, with a bent tail and one milky eye, steps forward. The circle parts for her like soft dough. She sits in the exact center where the offerings lie, licks her paw once, and places it squarely on the mouse. Silence. You don't breathe. None of the cats move. Then, a gust of warm air. From nowhere. It smells faintly of fire and myrrh and something else you can't name. The offerings, fig, feather, mouse, vanish. Gone. As if swallowed by the earth. The cats resume purring. A new rhythm begins. Tail taps against stone, paws shifting subtly, a feline heartbeat. One young ginger kitten hops awkwardly into the circle, tumbles over its own feet, then stumbles into a surprisingly graceful pose. No one laughs. Instead, the elder cat, the one with the cloudy eye, pads over and brushes her flank against the kitten. Affirmation. Initiation. You feel oddly honored just to witness it. You lean back slowly, careful not to disturb the scene. But the moment you move, 3 cats swivel their heads to watch you in eerie unison. You freeze. They don't attack. They don't hiss. They just watch. And it hits you, you're not just observing this ritual. You're inside it. You're part of the night watch now, whether you meant to be or not. One cat breaks formation and leaps onto the bench beside you. It's Mews again, the 4th or the 5th, or maybe something older than counting. She curls next to you, her side warm against yours, purring so deeply your ribcage hums. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the circle dissolves. Cats stretch, yawn, flick tails lazily as if nothing happened. A few groom each other. One scratches under its chin with great purpose, as if divinity leaves fleas. The spell, if that's what it was, lifts. You exhale. Historians still debate whether cats truly participated in religious rites or were merely symbolic presences. But you've seen too much now to dismiss this as coincidence. The timing, the silence, the offerings. It's too deliberate. Fringe researchers claim some bakery cats were trained, or more chillingly born, for this. Chosen by signs. Marked by dreams. They point to murals depicting kittens with stars on their foreheads or loaves that rise in feline shapes. Critics scoff. But now? You're not so sure who's being more reasonable. You glance up at the sky. The moon's shifted slightly, still full, but hazier now. A few clouds roll in from the desert edge, turning the courtyard shadows soft and unsure. Around you, the cats begin to disperse. Some climb back onto rooftops. Others vanish between stone walls like smoke. Mews stays beside you a moment longer, then pads off without a sound, tail trailing a line in the dust. And you? You're left sitting in the wake of mystery, your ears still ringing with that chorus of purrs. You wander back toward the bakery, where the ovens now glow low, like sleepy eyes half shut. A few cats still lounge in the residual warmth, stretched long, legs twitching in dream. The priestess, you're calling her that now, because what else could she be? Sits beside the door, cradling a cup of something steaming. She gestures for you to sit. Was that normal? You whisper. She smiles without looking at you. That was night baking, she says. You frown. But no bread was made. She sips, then shrugs. Not all bread is food. Right. Of course. Silly of you. You sip the offered drink, an herbal mix with a strange spice, like cinnamon and stone, and stare into the firelight. Behind your eyes, the rhythm of the watch still pulses, soft and slow. There's a warmth in your chest. Not just from the drink. You were a guest. Then a witness. Now maybe, just maybe, you're an initiate. The next morning begins not with sunlight, but with yelling. Well, shouting might be more accurate. Barked orders. Cracking clay. The unmistakable sound of a thrown loaf hitting a wall. You jolt awake on your bench bed to the chaos of a bread riot. You're up and moving before your brain catches up. The courtyard smells of scorched flour and panic. A group of bakers are arguing near the grain shed, their faces tight with fury, hands waving wildly over a shattered amphora. Someone's been stealing barley. Or at least, that's what they're saying. But the real issue seems deeper. You catch snippets, unblessed rise, loaves collapsing in the oven, cats not watching the dough. You'd think someone had cursed the bread gods. And maybe someone has. Because in the middle of this storm of accusations, posturing and flung dough, a single cat sits calmly atop a broken crate, grooming its paw, completely indifferent. It's a ginger tom with a notched ear and a squint like he's permanently unimpressed. You know this cat. You saw him during the night watch, lurking at the back, tail swaying with perfect rhythm. His name, whispered like gossip among the apprentices, is Crumlord. And Crumlord, somehow, is about to stop a riot. No one acknowledges him at first. The argument swells. Two bakers nearly come to blows over accusations of sabotage, one accusing the other of bribing cats with fish guts to keep their loaves safe. A wild claim, but honestly? After last night, you believe it's entirely plausible. Then Crumlord moves. Just a step. A lazy stretch. And then a leap, right onto the pile of bad loaves stacked for disposal. He needs the top one, slow and deliberate. The crowd goes still. One apprentice mutters, he's choosing. You lean in, breath caught. Crumlord finishes his inspection, swipes a single loaf off the pile, and sits beside it. And that's it. That's all it takes. The bickering halts like someone threw sand in the gears. The baker who threw the amphora exhales, slumps, and mutters, it wasn't cursed. It just wasn't done rising. No one argues. No one dares. The accused baker is no longer accused. The apprentice beside him breaks the chosen loaf open. It's still warm, underbaked, dense. Not cursed. Just early. And because Crumlord said so, that's now the official ruling. You blink. Did that cat just de-escalate a riot? An elder baker nearby grins. Told you. Smarter than scribes. It's not an exaggeration. In tense situations, bakery cats, especially elders like Crumlord, act as mediators. Maybe because they're neutral. Maybe because, in a world where gods can punish bread for the slightest slight, a cat's opinion carries divine weight. Historians still debate whether feline behavior in ancient Egyptian workspaces was interpreted as divine guidance or just practical reading of animal instinct. But in places like this bakery, the line is blurred so finely you could sift flour through it. A young scribe arrives from the temple, robes too clean, eyes too judgmental, and tries to take over the situation. He brandishes a scroll, quoting grain regulations and priestly protocols. No one listens. Crumlord yawns. The scribe clears his throat, tries again. A cat leaps onto his scroll. Another climbs his back. The scribe departs shortly thereafter. Crumlord does not. You follow the tomcat into a smaller side kitchen where he's greeted with reverence. Scraps of dried fig, a bowl of cooled barley mush, and a linen square for him to sit on. An apprentice bows deeply. For the diplomat, she whispers. Fringe researchers once found an outlier scroll in the archives of Thebes, a conflict record not signed by any high priest or official, but marked with a sketch of a cat and a paw print beside the entry issue resolved. It was dismissed as a joke. You're not laughing anymore. Later that day, you watch Crumlord inspect each prep station. He doesn't rush. He doesn't hurry. He simply exists. And every movement makes the bakers stand straighter, knead smoother, weigh more precisely. It's not fear. It's respect. He jumps onto a basket of cooled loaves, sniffs the top one, and then curls up on it. That one's for the high priest, a baker says immediately. Shouldn't we mark it? An apprentice asks. The baker just gestures to the snoozing cat. It is marked. You don't even question it. There's a strange stability here, you realize. The humans bicker, mess up, panic, but the cats remain. Always watching, judging, choosing, and, sometimes, intervening. That evening, the baker who started the morning's riot approaches you with a small loaf wrapped in cloth. For the diplomat, he says, nodding toward Crumlord. Peace offering. You take it, unsure whether it's meant for the cat or for you to deliver. But when you place it beside Crumlord, he gives you a brief glance, then returns to napping. Apparently, you passed the test. The priestess, appearing beside you like a cat herself, chuckles. Some cats guard the bread. Some guard peace. You glance down at Crumlord. He snores once, then shifts positions, one paw resting protectively over the peace loaf. And you realize, This bakery isn't just sustained by grain, ovens, and divine hope. It's run on diplomacy. And the diplomats have fur. You're led to the edge of town by an apprentice with flour in his hair and cat scratches on his arms. He doesn't say much, just gestures for you to follow as he winds through narrow alleys and past sleeping goats, finally stopping before what looks like a storage shed. "This is the census room," he says. "You blink. For the cats." He nods. "Every cycle. For records." Right. Because nothing says divine mystery like bureaucracy. You step inside expecting chaos, fur, feathers, maybe a tabby slapping ink across a papyrus sheet. Instead, the room is orderly, almost sacred. Scrolls line the walls, wrapped in linen and stacked in clay cubbies. A long table sits in the center, covered in styluses, ink blocks, and one extremely smug-looking calico perched in the middle like a paperweight. This is the cat census of Thebes. A scribe emerges from the shadows, hunched but alert, eyes bright as polished agate. He doesn't introduce himself, just shuffles forward and unrolls a fresh sheet of papyrus. "You're in time," he says. "We've just started the seasonal count." Seasonal, not annual. Because cats, as you've now gathered, do not abide by human calendars. He dips a stylus in ink and points to the calico. Tally, seshbit, female, curled tail. 3 kills this week. Whisker mood, ambivalent. Tail flick, moderate. You pause. You track their moods? Of course, the scribe replies, without blinking. Whisker tension indicates alignment with Bastet's will. Tail flick intensity correlates with domestic stability. If 3 or more flick simultaneously, it's an omen. Of what? He doesn't elaborate. You walk slowly around the room. Charts and symbols cover the walls. Tiny illustrations show cats in various postures, sitting, stretching, yawning, all labeled with scribal notations. Open mouth yawn equals grain increase. Ears flat equals milk spoilage risk. Multiple cats grooming simultaneously equals high fertility quarter. Historians still argue whether such data collections were purely symbolic or early attempts at feline-based weather forecasting. One fringe theory claims a scribe named Pahu of Thebes built an entire crop calendar on the nap patterns of a black tomcat named Kepri. The calendar failed spectacularly, but the cat lived to a remarkable 21 years. The census continues. Each cat is brought in, some voluntarily, others in a flurry of claws, and recorded. Their paw size is measured against a clay template. Their temperament is noted: cooperative, sleepy, vengeful. One gets the note, licked the ink, possible literary interests. The apprentice reads off figures while the scribe nods and scribbles. Total, 32 active cats, 5 in retirement, for missing, 1 presumed undercover. Undercover? Yes, the scribe replies flatly. Mingling with temple cats. Dual loyalty suspected. You decide not to ask further. A cart arrives outside, carrying jars of fish and bread crusts. It's the cat ration shipment, food gifted by the grain tax collectors. Apparently, even feline census officials have perks. Cats flock to the doorway, and the scribe pauses his writing just long enough to scatter a few dried sardines onto a woven mat labeled public rations. You notice a scroll titled Incidents, Tail Conflicts and Sand Disputes. It includes things like Stripe versus One Ear, Dispute over Sunbeam Territory. Saffron Rise scratched guest. Guest cried. Guest forgiven. Crumlord stared at oven too long. Loaf rose unevenly. You're not sure what's more unsettling, that this exists, or that it makes sense now. The census records don't just list identities. They track patterns. One scroll shows a bar chart, not bars exactly, but rising stacks of loaves, marked by feline behavior. Increased purring equals stronger ferment, one note says. Another, mouse population down since Meum began cohabiting with Oven 2. You're witnessing a data-driven religion. At one point, a cat hops onto the table and deliberately knocks a stylus into the ink bowl. The scribe doesn't flinch. That's a no on the second grain shipment, he says. You blink. How is that a no? He shrugs. We ask. They answer. You're pretty sure the stylus knock was accidental, but then again, this cat also sniffed the scroll, sneezed once, and then walked off like a prophet exiting a vision. One apprentice carries in a ginger kitten wrapped in linen like a sacred relic. The kitten sneezes 3 times. The scribe lights a cone of incense, murmurs a chant, and writes, 3 sneezes equals Nile swelling. Good omen. You try to hide your grin. He notices. You laugh, he says, but this room predicted the locusts. Twice. Fair. He hands you a stylus. You hesitate. Go on, he urges. Pick one. Record what you see. You look around. A gray tabby is curled in the sunbeam near the doorway. She stretches, rolls over, and kicks a dust mote with one paw before falling asleep. You write. Name unknown. Yawned, stretched, kicked dust. Possibly dreaming of conquest. Tail flick equals sleepy disdain. Recommendation, more warm stones for napping. The scribe nods. A natural. You're beaming. Until he adds, we'll test your accuracy at next moon. Oh. The cats begin to disperse, bellies full, fur clean. The apprentice collects the scrolls and seals them with wax bearing the mark of botet, a cat's face with a single dot between the eyes. You linger by the doorway as the calico pads over, brushes against your leg, and sits pointedly. You write one more line. Seshbit approves. Morale high. Ink licked again. Likely prophetic. And she purrs. You can smell it before you see it. A sour, almost fizzy tang riding the breeze. Equal parts sweat, yeast, and whatever mysterious magic turns humble grain into golden loaves. The apprentice leads you back through the winding alleys to the banks of the Nile, where something clearly went wrong. You arrive just in time to see 2 bakers arguing over a shattered clay bowl near the edge of the dock. The air is thick with panic and vinegar. A 3rd baker is holding his head in both hands, muttering, she knocked it. She knocked it in. At his feet, a cat with striking mottled fur sits serenely, tail wrapped neatly around her paws. No shame. No guilt. Just that calm, eternal feline expression that says, you're lucky I allow you to witness me. What happened? You ask. The apprentice lowers his voice. The starter. She dropped the starter into the river. You blink. The sourdough starter? He nods grimly. The original. The blessed one. Been feeding it since Hatshepsut was a child. Right. So no big deal then, just the living soul of the bakery drowned in muddy Nile water by a whiskered deity. The cat in question, a long-bodied calico known as Yeret the Stirrer, stands, stretches, and walks off, utterly unbothered. As she leaves, one of the bakers gasps, pointing to the river. It's bubbling. And sure enough, where the bowl sank, bubbles rise. Steady. Suspicious. Now everyone's staring. The sourdough starter is gone. But the Nile has started fermenting. One baker falls to his knees. It's a sign. Botet is blessing the harvest. Another murmurs, or cursing the fishermen. Historians still argue whether these sorts of incidents were interpreted as divine omens or convenient excuses. Records from grain guilds mention unexpected yeast blooms as both miraculous and catastrophic, depending on who was blamed. In this case, blame the cat, praise the gods, order new clay bowls. You follow the scent of the loss all the way back to the bakery, where a replacement starter is already underway. A small group of cats circles the fresh mixture like sages watching the birth of a universe. And Yerrit? She's sitting by the oven, licking her paw. Not one person raises a hand against her. In fact, someone brings her a bowl of warm milk. You whisper to the apprentice, "Why do they treat her like that? She ruined it." He shrugs. "She's done it 3 times now. Each time, the loaves got better." And suddenly, you understand. This isn't sabotage. It's catalysis. Fringe accounts in temple records refer to cats who caused the bloom or kissed the starter, believed to infuse dough with divine potential. One infamous tale describes a cat who walked across a batch of raw dough, causing every loaf to rise 3 fingers taller than normal, and bake into perfect likenesses of Bastet's face. The apprentice gestures toward a corner where a trio of bakers chant softly over the new mixture. Each holds a whisker, a real one, shed naturally, of course, from Yerrit herself. "Her blessing," he says, reverently. You peek over their shoulders. They're stirring in a synchronized figure-8 pattern, pausing every 3rd loop to whisper something into the bowl. Probably a prayer. Possibly a recipe. Yerrit watches from her perch. Doesn't blink. Later that afternoon, the first test loaf is pulled from the oven. You expect something dramatic. A face in the crust. A celestial meow. Instead, what emerges is simple. Modest. A round loaf, warm and faintly golden, with a soft indentation in the top. A paw print. Not baked in. Pressed gently, while the dough was still rising. You glance at Yerrit. She yawns, showing all her teeth. One baker falls to his knees again. "This is it," someone whispers. "This is the bloom loaf." You watch as the loaf is carefully cut into 7 slices, each one placed on a different altar. Bastet's, Hathor's, the little fire god that watches over the ovens, even a stone set aside for Meum IV. You're handed a tiny piece. You chew slowly, expecting revelation. It's bread. Really good bread. Slightly tangy, with a depth of flavor that dances on your tongue like something born under a full moon. You sigh. "Okay, that's magic." The apprentice nods. That evening, a celebration unfolds in the garden. Cats and humans alike bask in the afterglow of the miracle of the bloom. Incense burns low. Offerings are left at random doorways. Bits of bread, dried fish, bundles of herbs. Everywhere, the phrase "Yerrit stirs" is whispered like a blessing. A young baker pulls you aside, eyes wide. "I saw her," he says. "She dipped her paw in the Nile. Then she sneezed. Then the bowl fell." You blink. "You're saying it wasn't an accident?" He shudders. "She chose to bless it." You believe him. That night, the cats gather not in ritual, but in comfort. They pile into corners and baskets, curl near ovens and windows, and purr like thunder rumbling through warm stone. Yerrit curls beside the cooling oven, one paw over her face, tail twitching softly. And you? You dream of rivers that bubble without warning, and loaves that rise with secrets you'll never quite understand. You wake to the smell of fish. But not the usual pleasant Nileside aroma. This is something stronger. Funkier. Almost suspiciously intentional. You peer outside to find a small pile of dried fish neatly stacked on a stone slab beside the bakery's entrance. It's not an accident. It's an offering. To the cats? No, not exactly. To the cat's favor. You watch as a nervous temple guard sneaks forward, places another fish delicately on the pile, and whispers, "Safe ovens, safe feet, no burnt crust." Then he scurries off before anyone can see him. You turn to the priestess, who, of course, is already standing beside you, sipping a cup of something steaming. "He's been here 3 times this week," she says, deadpan. keeps having dreams about loaves that scream. You raise an eyebrow. Cursed fish, she says simply. Right. Naturally. This is the strange hidden economy of the bakery, the unspoken, unregulated world of cursed fish and cat bribes. It's not an official system. There are no scrolls documenting it. No ledgers, no laws. But everyone knows. If your bread keeps burning, your dough refuses to rise, or your kiln inexplicably cracks in the middle of the night, you go see the cats. Or rather, you go see the bribes. Historians still debate whether this behavior was more religious or superstitious, whether people actually believed in feline curses or just couldn't bear the shame of poorly risen loaves. But in a society where divine signs are found in mold patterns and mouse droppings, a twitchy tale is just as sacred as a dream from RA. You watch a caravan driver approach, glancing nervously in all directions. He places a whole smoked perch beside the offering slab, mutters something about Bastet's forgiveness, and tucks a copper bead into the fish's mouth. The priestess doesn't move. You're not going to take it? She chuckles. It's not for me. Sure enough, within moments, a large grey tabby with a scar across her nose pads out from behind a basket and sniffs the perch. She takes exactly one bite, then turns and walks away. Accepted, the priestess says. You're about to ask what happens when an offering is rejected, but your question is answered before it's spoken. A baker approaches. Young, cocky, overconfident. He tosses a single half-dried fish on the slab, then smirks and says, "That should do." A striped tomcat approaches. Sniffs it. Pauses. Then promptly knocks the fish off the slab with one disdainful paw and walks away without a sound. Moments later, a crash echoes from inside the bakery. The baker's oven, one of the smaller clay ones near the entrance, has collapsed inward as if it had simply given up. The baker stares. The priestess shrugs. He skimped on the bribe. The cats don't like arrogance. You nod slowly, making a mental note never to underestimate the economy of respect. Later, you sit in the shade near the fish slab and observe the flow of traffic. Not just bakers, though there are many, but also a sandalmaker whose shop caught fire last week. She leaves 2 sardines and a ring of dried thyme. A weaver whose cats refuse to nap on his textiles. He brings a garland of smoked eels. A priest who won't admit he's superstitious but drops a small fish wrapped in linen like a guilty schoolboy. This isn't just tribute. It's a conversation. A negotiation between the human world and the realm of whiskers. Fringe Egyptologists have pointed out graffiti in an abandoned granary that reads, "Burnt bread? Ask the cat." Nearby, a drawing of a fish and a loaf with a slash through it suggests early iconographic shorthand for "you didn't pay your bribe." But what's most intriguing is the idea that the cats themselves are selective. Not all fish are accepted. One apprentice tells you in confidence that there was a brief period when the cats stopped responding altogether. Offerings were left untouched. Loaves turned sour. Mice returned. Panic spread. What fixed it? Fig jelly, he whispers. Apparently, a new flavor offering was introduced. Figs soaked in goat milk, mashed into a paste, and spread on tiny barley cakes. The cats loved it. The curses lifted. You ask if they still make it. He nods. But only for emergencies. Or for Miam. She's picky. You glance toward the corner where Miam reclines like a loaf in repose, one paw lazily resting on a plate of fig-smeared cake. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. You begin to notice other forms of exchange too. One baker leaves a sprig of mint each morning beside a favorite sunspot, an invitation. If a cat chooses that spot to nap, he knows the day's batch will bake evenly. Another apprentice braids whiskers, naturally shed of course, into a charm that hangs above his grain storage. The cats don't just accept fish. They accept gesture. Intention. A humble offering made with care outweighs a large one tossed with arrogance. You watch as an elderly baker shuffles forward with a bowl of broth. Not fish, vegetable. Thick with lentils and something else. A faintly sour note. "It's soup," he says quietly. "For her." He sets it down near the fish slab. A thin gray cat, gaunt and clearly aging, approaches. She licks the broth. Slowly, reverently. The priestess nods. For the ones who remember before. The fish is for the present. The soup is for the past. That evening, the moon rises over a bakery flush with fresh bread, purring cats, and an altar stacked with carefully arranged offerings. Not a single fish is wasted. Not a single bribe goes ignored. And somewhere, deep in the weaving of smoke and flour, you begin to understand. In this world, blessings are earned not with power or rank, but with patience. With respect. With a gift offered quietly and accepted in silence. And always, always, with one eye on the cat. Night falls like a velvet curtain, heavy with stars, and the cats begin to gather again. Not for ritual this time, not for training or census, but for something far more revolutionary. You're led to the far edge of the courtyard by a nervous apprentice holding a small clay lamp. "You can come," he whispers, "but don't interrupt." The priestess nods her silent approval, and off you go, following a flickering light into the shadows behind the ovens. You pass racks of drying mint, an old fishbone shrine, a stack of discarded bread molds, and then, through a crumbling reed fence, into a hidden alcove you swear wasn't there yesterday. Inside, 17 cats. All seated. All facing the same direction. In the center of the circle, an upturned basket serves as a makeshift podium. This is the first feline union. Or at least, that's what the apprentice calls it. It started after Crumlord was denied second breakfast, he whispers, dead serious. He's organizing now. And sure enough, there he is, the ginger diplomat himself, sitting squarely atop the basket, tail curled around his paws, eyes half-lidded but sharp. You suppress a laugh. Because really it's too perfect. But no one else is laughing. The cats around him are still. Listening. Focused. A smaller tabby pads forward, deposits a rolled scrap of parchment at Crumlord's feet, then sits back on her haunches. He sniffs it once. Then boops it with his paw. The apprentice beams. That's the petition. You blink. There, submitting a petition? He nods solemnly. They want daily sunbeam breaks, increased access to warm stones, and fig jelly rationing. You stare. Wait, they wrote this? Well, he hedges, technically I wrote it. But only after they all flicked their tails when I read the draft. Right. This is how revolutions begin, apparently. Not with fire and pitchforks, but with tail-flick consensus and basket-based assemblies. One of the elder cats rises to her feet, a long, lean creature with half an ear and eyes like cracked olives. She makes a series of slow, deliberate movements, a paw raised, a tail swish, a blink and turn. The other cats watch, then mimic. She's seconding the motion, the apprentice says. Of course she is. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians ever believed cats could form structured hierarchies beyond instinctual clouders. But you're witnessing something far more nuanced than survival behavior. This is governance. This is protest. This is politics. You sneak a glance at the priestess, who now leans against a crumbling wall, arms crossed, watching with quiet amusement. They've been organizing for a while, she says. Started with shared sunspots. Then came the food-sharing pact. Now it's formal. And you let them? You ask. She raises an eyebrow. Let. Right. The meeting continues. Cats take turns padding forward, leaving behind tufts of fur or pieces of string. Votes, you're told. One cat accidentally knocks over the lamp. Total darkness for 5 seconds. Complete chaos. But then, order. Crumb Lord stands. Or, more accurately, sits taller. The other cat's quiet. The apprentice scribbles something furiously on the back of the petition parchment. Then he nods, folds the scroll, and tucks it into a small satchel. Ratified, he whispers. A final movement. Crumlord walks to a corner of the alcove where a sunstone, collected weeks ago and still faintly warm, is placed on a linen square. He paws it once, then lies beside it. Meeting adjourned. You step back into the night air, a little dazed. They actually did it, you say. They passed a resolution. The priestess shrugs. Every creature seeks balance, even those with whiskers. Later that week, small changes ripple across the bakery. New sunbeam squares are cleared on the west side of the courtyard, space previously reserved for grain drying. The baker in charge shrugs. The cats wanted it. Who am I to argue? Fish rations are adjusted. Fig jelly appears more often. One apprentice installs a tiny hammock between 2 flour sacks. It's immediately occupied by a gray tabby who has since refused to move. Fringe researchers once uncovered a fragmented scroll in Memphis showing a series of cat paw prints beside rudimentary contract symbols: grain, fish, sun. It was dismissed as a child's scribble. Now? You're not so sure. The mood in the bakery shifts. More rhythmic. A subtle hum of contentment. One morning, you find a paw print pressed into a clay tile left beside your sleeping mat. No note. No explanation. Just the imprint. You keep it. A symbol, perhaps. A welcome. Or maybe, union membership. You feel it before you hear it. A chill in the air, a hush that settles behind the ovens like a memory too heavy to move. The priestess appears again, motioning with one slender hand toward the edge of the bakery's back wall, where the stone gives way to soft sand. She doesn't speak. Just begins walking, and of course you follow. Beyond the reeds and stacks of broken pottery, there's a narrow path carved into the dunes. It winds like a breadcrumb trail, barely visible unless you're looking for it. And someone, or something, has been walking it. Paw prints. Dozens of them. Some fresh, some faded. All heading in the same direction. You follow them. It takes a while before you realize where you are. The scent gives it away: dust, dried yeast, and time. You've wandered into one of the old tombs. Not a grand, golden one. A baker's tomb. Forgotten by most. Not by the cats. Inside, the darkness is thick and close, lit only by your flickering lamp and the phosphorescent glow of lichen creeping along the edges of wall carvings. You reach a chamber lined with faded murals, simple, everyday scenes, kneading dough, carrying loaves, slicing onions. But look closer. At the foot of every mural, a cat. Always watching. Always near the food. Some are ordinary, but a few shimmer faintly, perhaps painted with crushed lapis. One cat seems to glow. You blink and it doesn't stop. At the back of the chamber, a stone table holds 6 loaves, perfectly preserved, still bearing faint scorch marks and the telltale curve of a paw print pressed gently into the dough. One is cracked open. Inside? A single gray whisker. You swallow. This is the tomb of the 6 crumbs, the priestess murmurs behind you. You jump. These loaves were baked by the first union, she continues. 1 loaf for each truth the cats agreed to keep. You glance at the loaves, suddenly less hungry. Do people still come here? You ask. She shakes her head. Only those who've been marked. You look down at your sandal. There it is. A tiny, unmistakable paw print. When did that get there? From the shadows, a soft sound, the echo of claws on stone. A cat appears, sleek black, eyes like twin moons. You recognize him from the census, Sharp Whisker of Dawn. He walks slowly to the table, places one paw on the cracked loaf, and stares at you. The priestess steps back. You're invited. To what? She doesn't answer. You follow Sharp Whisker deeper into the tomb. The corridor narrows, then opens into a hidden chamber, domed and glimmering with pale mineral veins. The walls are etched not with pictures, but maps. Not of the land, but of dreams. Each etching shows a cat curled atop a symbol, a loaf, a pyramid, a reed boat. Beneath each, lines of hieroglyphs dance like poetry. You can't read them. Not with your eyes. But something in your chest hums, like a warm purr curling in your ribs. Sharp Whisker leaps to a small platform and kneads the dust 3 times. Behind him, a false wall creaks open. Inside, treasure. But not gold. Not jewels. Breadcrumbs. Thousands of them. Each placed with obsessive care in spirals, grids, trails. Some form the shape of whiskers. Others waves. In one corner, a perfect loaf rendered entirely from tiny crumbs. This is their archive, the priestess says softly. A memory of every loaf. Every scent. Every hunt. Every whisper of flour. Do they remember it all? She nods. They never forget. Fringe scholars once reported dreams of being led into chambers made of crust and light, where cats whispered secrets in a language of crumbs. They were laughed out of academia. But here you are. Sharp Whisker pads forward and drops a fresh crumb at your feet. An offering. A welcome. You drop to one knee and return the gesture, pressing a crumb from your own pocket, from the fig cake meum rejected last week, onto the chamber floor. A soft sound ripples through the room, purring. You turn, and there they are, more cats, slipping through unseen cracks, weaving between columns, pressing against your legs. It isn't frightening. It's sacred. These are the keepers. You follow them one last time, up a winding staircase carved into the bedrock, emerging behind a dune where the stars hang low like fruit ripe for plucking. And there, at the very peak of the tomb, sits a statue. A cat. Life-sized. Made of solid obsidian. Its eyes are missing, but only physically. You feel their weight on you. The priestess joins you. They guard the dead. And the secrets of the bread. You sit beside her. Below, the bakery flickers in torchlight. Cats move like shadows. Humans sleep like dough waiting to rise. You look down at the tiny paw print still pressed into your sandal. You're one of them now, she says, not unkindly. Not quite human. Not quite cat. Just enough of both to see the breadcrumbs in the dark. The next morning, the bakery is quiet, but not the kind of silence that means absence. It's the hush of expectation, like the breath just before a loaf crests and cracks golden in the oven. You rise with that feeling curling around your ankles, following it toward the main hearth where the air trembles faintly from heat and something more mysterious. Inside, only one oven glows. And beside it, curled like a shadow made real, lies a one-eyed cat with further color of cooled ash. Her name, you're told in whispers, is Ashwa. And she doesn't belong to any baker, census, or union. She doesn't even eat the fish. She just knows things. You settle beside a cracked bench as the priestess slides something into the oven, an oddly shaped loaf, almost sculptural. It's braided in a spiral, with a single black olive pressed into the top. A loaf with intent. She dreamed it, the priestess says quietly, nodding toward Ashwa. Wait. The cat dreamed it? Yes, she replies, as if it's obvious. Welcome to the world of oven gods and furry mediums. You lean forward as the bread bakes. The scent is unlike any before, yeasty, sure, but tinged with burnt cedar and something almost metallic. Ashwa watches it rise with one unblinking eye, as still as an obsidian statue. She doesn't twitch, doesn't blink. And then she meows. Once. Sharp. Direct. The priestess pulls the loaf out, cools it for mere seconds, then places it on a carved tray and sets it beside the oven. She bows to Ashwa. So do the other cats, emerging from corners like shadows summoned by scent. You do the same. Because suddenly, this feels serious. There are those who claim cats walk only in the seen world, the priestess murmurs, but those who've lived with them know better. They cross between layers. She says this with a hand on the stone oven, which pulses faintly. Not with fire. With something else. A low purring starts. Not from Ashwa. From the oven. The loaf cracks audibly. You stare at it. A second later, so do the other cats. And in that moment, the scent changes. Sweetens. Thickens. Becomes ancient. You blink. You're not in the bakery anymore. You're standing in a desert kitchen. No walls. Just horizon. The oven before you is carved from a single piece of black stone, glowing faintly with inscriptions you can't read but somehow understand. Around you, cats sit in perfect stillness, forming a circle wider than any room you've known. In the center, Ashwa. But younger. Whole-eyed. Surrounded by flames that do not burn. She speaks. Not with words, but with loaf. She nudges one forward, flat, scorched on one side, painted with something that looks like time and bone dust. You eat it without question. It tastes like grief and honey. The sky folds inward, and suddenly you're back in the bakery, sweating and shivering all at once. The priestess offers you water. You drink, not because you're thirsty, but because your heart feels like it's been needed too many times. What was that? A message, she says. Sometimes from the oven gods. Sometimes from what came before the gods. Why me? She shrugs. Ashwa chooses. Always has. You glance at the one-eyed cat. She's licking her paw now, utterly disinterested in your existential awakening. Figures. Historians still argue whether such dreams were metaphors, hallucinations, or deeply spiritual journeys into the unseen realms. Some claim the oven gods were just local elemental spirits, no different from fire sprites or wind demons. Others believe they were the original deities, long before Ra or Botet, born of fire, flour, and flesh. A fringe theory proposes that early Egyptian bread-making wasn't just sustenance, but ceremony, each loaf a medium of divination. The shapes, the cracks, even the bubbles said to foretell births, deaths, floods, and victories. Loaves were read like scrolls. Baked omens. You believe it now. Later that afternoon, the priestess lets you handle one of the dream loaves, cooled, marked, sacred. As you lift it, your fingers tingle. Not unpleasant. Just aware. You place it back gently. Ashwa gives a faint nod. You realize the cats aren't just protectors or diplomats or census subjects. They're channels. And some of them, like Ashwa, are mediums for messages that rise with the dough and crack open in the heat. Purring prophets. That evening, as the sunset washes the courtyard in rose and gold, the bakers hold a quiet meal. No feasts. Just shared loaves. Ashwa is offered the first slice. She does not eat it, but rests her paw on it. A blessing. That night, you dream of ovens that speak in smoke, and paw prints pressed into the surface of your soul. You wake from your dream with the taste of ash and anise still lingering on your tongue. The sun isn't up yet, but something in the air tells you today will be different. The bakery is too quiet. Not the warm, sleepy hush of early morning, but an alert stillness. The kind cats get when they know a storm is coming. You step outside and immediately see them, the kittens. Not the usual sleepy bundles rolling around near the ovens or pawing at reed baskets. These are older kittens. Bold. organized, and slightly feral. They move with purpose, tails high, heads held like tiny revolutionaries. "Trouble," mutters the priestess. You watch as a group of them weaves through the courtyard, carrying something. It's a loaf. But not any loaf. It's shaped like a triangle, studded with olives and honey-dried mint. Illegal under current temple food codes. The flavor combination, banned for inappropriate metaphysical warmth, is whispered about among apprentices. Loaves like these haven't been baked since the drought riots. Where did they get that? You whisper. The rebel bakery, the priestess says. Ah. So that wasn't a rumor. You're led to the outer edge of the fringe, beyond the census wall, past the forgotten olive groves, to a crumbling mud brick shack half swallowed by a fig tree. It smells like anise and soot. And goats. A cat slips past your feet, ducking into the shack. Inside, chaos. Glorious, sticky, forbidden chaos. Tiny ovens. Clay bowls stacked high. Flour everywhere. And in the center, 4 kittens stirring something in a pot with what can only be described as defiant glee. They see you. One blinks. The others ignore you entirely. This is where they make the forbidden loaves, the priestess murmurs. You can see why. There's a round focaccia smeared with date paste and crushed coriander. A lattice loaf filled with goat cheese and pickled onions. Even a sour milk rye shaped like a sleeping cat, with poppy seeds for whiskers. These aren't standard recipes, you say. She nods. They're experimental, unblessed, unregulated, but beautiful. You spot a wall covered in paw prints, each one painted in a different natural dye. Blue from crushed berries, red from pomegranate, gold from ground turmeric. Above them, scratched into the wall, are the words, written with dramatic flourish. We rise our own way. You grin despite yourself. The kittens don't speak in meows. They perform. One balances on a flour barrel while the others chant and paw at the dough in rhythm. It's like performance art, but edible. They believe in freedom, the priestess explains. In loaves that reflect the soul rather than tradition. Are they dangerous? Only to systems, she says, sipping something that smells of fermented fig. One kitten scurries up to you and offers a slice of something warm, sticky, and completely unclassifiable. You take it. It's chewy, tangy, a little illegal, and perfect. Fringe scholars have long speculated about off-grid bakeries that existed outside the temple-authorized systems, places where food, art, and magic mingled without oversight. These loaves often appear in 2 murals, tiny, creative, iconoclastic, labeled not with prayers, but with symbols for joy, chaos, and sometimes rebellion. One legend speaks of the Crustwalkers, a gang of rogue kittens who fled the temple of Botet and started their own bread cult. People scoffed. You're here now. You watch as the kittens prepare their next batch, a bread so spicy you can feel it across the room. One tiny cat guards the oven, licking its paw between each bake. What happens to these loaves? You ask. They're traded, the priestess says. Shared with cats who feel constrained. Smuggled into bakeries where the rules are too tight. Smuggled. She nods. You picture it, a loaf tucked under a baker's robe, passed quietly at dawn. A kitten leaving coded crumbs beside an oven. A rebel cat marking a crate with a single claw swipe that says, "Bake freely." They're part of the movement, she continues. Not against the bakery, but for something else. A future where loaves are more than food or offering. Where cats can experiment. Where rituals can evolve. You hear the kittens meow in unison as they pull another tray from the oven. 12 star-shaped biscuits dusted with powdered clove and crushed rose petals. Each one is offered to a cat. Each one is accepted. You realize that, in a way, this is a liturgy. Not formal. Not sanctioned, but powerful. A ritual of resistance wrapped in yeast and love. Suddenly, you wonder what your bakery back home would think of this. Of the softness, the risk, the scent of treason baked at 400 degrees. You ask the priestess, "Do you support them?" She smiles. "I remember them." Later, back at the main bakery, a delivery arrives. No one saw where it came from. Just a crate of oddly shaped loaves and a paw-drawn note. From the fringe, "May your crumbs be wild." The bakers hesitate, then slice, then taste. They do not stop. One cat purrs so loudly the walls hum. And for the first time in many moons, a bakery scribe writes this in the margins of his scroll. The loaves are changing. The cats approve. Let it rise. It's dusk now, and the shadows stretch long over the flour-stained tiles of the courtyard. The oven fires burn low, no longer roaring but breathing, soft exhalations of warmth into the cooling air. You sit on the step outside the bakery, watching the last light flicker across rows of sleeping cats. Some lie curled like commas, others stretch like dashes between the end of the day and the beginning of something eternal. There's a presence beside you. It's her. The cat with the scar over one eye, fur gray as ash and breath slow as a lullaby. The last crumb. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. You're already seen. She's been here since before the third farrow of bread, the priestess says behind you. Before the first census. Before the loaves had names. The last crumb yawns. Not dramatically. Not for effect. Just a slow, inevitable inhale that carries dust, flour, and memory. She guards the oven that never cools, the priestess whispers. Even when no fire burns. You blink. You hadn't noticed it before. This half-buried structure at the corner of the garden. Not quite an oven. Not quite a shrine. Somewhere in between. Its clay has crumbled, vines creep through its base, and the top is long since collapsed. But in its heart, a faint glow. You step closer. No heat. No smoke. Just that quiet glow, like the dying coal of a loaf long since removed. One that still remembers the baking. This was the first, the priestess says. Where the first sacred paw print was pressed into dough. Where the cats gathered before there were scrolls, rituals, or bribes. You kneel beside it. The last crumb follows, slow and deliberate. She places one paw on the broken edge. And purrs. It is not loud. But it echoes. Through the tiles. Through your chest. Through time. Memories rise with the warmth. Miam curled beside the census scroll. Crumlord halting a riot with one loaf. Ashwa's eye gazing into the dream of a fire god. And through it all, crumbs. Tiny, sacred, scattered breadcrumbs that formed a trail from then to now. The priestess kneels beside you. When the scribes left, she says, when the gods moved on, when the bakers forgot their chants and the ovens grew cold, she remained. You nod, though you don't fully understand. She'll remain after us too, the priestess adds, eyes on the glowing crack. The last one to remember. Until another comes who can smell the sacred dough in the wind and hear the whisper of yeast in silence. You look at the last crumb. She blinks slowly, and then presses her head gently against your shoulder. It's not affection. It's initiation. There are no scrolls. No ceremonies. Just this. A nod. A purr. A loaf-shaped hole in your soul that you didn't know needed filling. Later, as the sky turns indigo and stars blink open like crumbs across a celestial cloth, you walk through the garden one last time. Cats curl into sleep. Loaves cool on trays. And from somewhere unseen, a soft purring continues, like the earth itself breathing through fur. The priestess stays behind. You carry the last slice of bread from today's final batch. You break it in two. One half for you. The other, you leave on the old oven, where the last crumb now sleeps, her tail curled over her nose. The fire beneath her is gone, but the glow remains. Forever. And now, with the stars hung like slow blinking lanterns across the desert sky, and the ovens cooled to a hush, we drift. You lie beneath the soft breath of night, still dusted with flour, your heart still humming with the warmth of loaves and paw prints, of whispered rebellions and dreams made of dough. The cats have retreated into corners of the dark, curling into themselves like quiet questions never needing answers. Their purrs echo gently in your memory, not loud now, just threads in the quiet loom of sleep. In the distance, a river moves. The Nile flows past the broken tombs and warm kitchens, past reed boats and fig trees, carrying with it secrets too old to name. The breadcrumbs of gods and kittens, of forgotten bakers and dreaming loaves, drift onward. You did well to follow the crumbs here. And now, as your breath slows and the cool night wraps around your limbs like soft linen, you feel it, the hush of being part of something ancient, gentle, absurdly sacred. Maybe you'll dream of the rebel bakery tonight. Maybe of Crumlord blinking in judgment. Or perhaps of Ashwa, staring into a loaf as if it holds the blueprints of the world. But whatever dream comes, let it rise slowly. Let it warm. And when morning comes, you'll wake with a paw print faintly pressed into your thoughts. Sleep well. You've been blessed by the bakery cats of Egypt. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a close. But the echoes of history don't vanish with the silence. They linger, in the hush between breaths, in the soft hum beneath your thoughts, in the stories that settle into your dreams like dust on an old manuscript. If you enjoyed this quiet corner of the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment with where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is there. There's something deeply comforting about knowing people all over the globe are drifting off together, wrapped in the same ancient tale. I'll be right here next time, waiting in the candlelight, ready to turn another page of forgotten history just for you. Until then, let the stars above keep watch.